Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Elyachar, the chief content producer and writer at jakesick.com, a pop culture entertainment news website. If you're listening to this on audio, please give us a 5-star rating. If you're watching this on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and please subscribe. I am honored and thrilled to welcome this incredible journalist today as my next guest. He is the co-anchor of the Fox 11 News Los Angeles for a weeknight newscast from 5, 6, and 10 p.m. He's also the host of The Issue Is. He is also a 7-time Emmy winner and a recipient of 4 Golden Mics. He has conducted one-on-one interviews with high-profile political leaders that range from President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris to several California governors, including current Governor Gavin Newsom, Jerry Brown, and Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. So please help me welcome Elex Michaelson to the podcast.
Hi there. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Alex, I'm very honored and thrilled to have you here. It means a lot to me. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with me.
Grateful to be here.
All right, let's get started. So when did you get interested in journalism, and how did that passion evolve the desire to pursue a career in the media industry?
You know, I was interested in journalism from the time I was a little kid. I remember watching the Today Show with Bryant and Katie and Matt, and I remember watching Bryant Gumbel's Last Day and watching the montage of everything and thinking, what an incredible gig to be able to travel the world, to talk to some of the most interesting people, to be a witness to history on people's best days, on people's worst days, to be able to learn for a living, to be able to have fun and get paid for it. And I thought, I'd like to do that. I've always been interested in politics from the time I was a little kid. I was sort of amazed at watching States of the Union with Bill Clinton and watching the way that the country talked about politics and the sort of interesting strategy associated with it, kind of like sports, but with real consequences in terms of what happens and the outcomes and the importance of talking about it. And from the time I was a little kid, I would watch news broadcasts as an elementary school kid. And so, the idea that I now get to do what I watched then and interact with a lot of the folks that I used to watch back then is very, very cool.
And I gotta say, it is so surreal because before we got on here, I just watched your interview with Katie Couric.
Yeah. Yes, Katie Couric is one of the reasons I got into broadcasting. It has been, wild in the last few years to get to know her and to consider her a friend, and to have spent time with her is incredible. And so having Katie on our show and having a 2-box of me talking to Katie still kind of blows my mind. Just to hear her say my name is kind of weird and wild, and a reminder in a lot of ways that, dreams can come true in this business.
Absolutely, absolutely. I am right there with you. I grew up watching Brian, Katie, and Matt and Ann, and one of my all-time favorite moments, still remember, is going into Rockefeller Plaza and getting a hug from Ann Curry. Still one of my all-time favorite moments.
I stood outside the window as a little kid and had a sign, and Al Roker came over and talked to me and my sister. And then years later, when I was in college, I did this breast cancer awareness t-shirt campaign called Get Hands On. We were actually featured on the Today Show. And instead of being on the side where, the crowd stands, I was right on the other side of it as a guest with our t-shirt, and Ann Curry and Hoda Kotb interviewed us. And it was still like one of the highlights of my life. It was so fun. I cried when I first walked up there and got to see the fact that we had made it onto that show. I was so nervous. I couldn't sleep for the entire night before. I walked like 50 blocks in New York because I was so hyped up to do the show. And then to get to meet them, and at the time to meet Matt and Katie, and then now to have Katie on the show is a kind of a wild full circle moment.
Absolutely, but we're not here to talk about any of today's show crew. We're here to talk about all about you. So guys, for those of you who are not in Los Angeles, Alex has done a phenomenal job covering the City of Angels since 2010. So what have been some of the most memorable news moments that you covered during your time in Los Angeles, and why did they stand out?
Well, I mean, I think the sort of biggest and craziest news story that I covered in the field was the manhunt for Christopher Dorner. This was a former LAPD officer who put out a manifesto targeting officers and their families and had killed a few of them. And there was this days-long search for him where other people would come up dead. It felt like something out of a movie, not knowing, officers got put into hiding in different places. It was crazy going back and forth to Big Bear where we were covering it and other places, not knowing where he was. And there was a massive shootout that ended it. And then they ended up lighting the house he was in on fire. That was wild. Another week that was just insane was when we had, civil unrest in Los Angeles after the George Floyd incident. And I was on the air for 12 hours at a time with no breaks, no teleprompter, no commercials, no scripts, and doing that for like 7 days in a row was a lot, to watch our city. I remember, there was an incredible week in 2018 where on Tuesday, Gavin Newsom was elected governor of California. On Wednesday night, there was a massive shooting at the Borderline Grill, which was a place that I used to go to as a high school student growing up in Agoura Hills, going out there to cover that. And then later that night, a big fire broke out, a Woolsey fire, which devastated our community. That was an incredible week. I remember being on the air moments after Kobe Bryant died and sort of holding LA's hand through that. And so some of those moments really stand out, most of them traumatic, as just incredible LA moments where it wasn't just a regular local news audience, but the entire city sort of woke up and was engaged in a way you don't normally see.
And that's amazing. That must have been, those are just amazing, powerful moments, especially Kobe's death, and then also being there during like the George Floyd riots and then the aftermath of George Floyd. And COVID was very interesting. So I got to say, kudos to you for dealing with all those news. You are incredible. And what I like about you is I am a huge fan of The Issue Is, and I really wanted to come and have you on. So can you, Alex, for those of my listeners and audience members who don't know what The Issue Is, could you describe the show to them?
What is the issue? The issue is, we in 2018 when I came to Fox 11 from ABC, the management at Fox said, we want to do a show at 10:30. We want to do something political having to do with, at the time there was a governor's race. Just make it interesting. And so it was kind of up to us to fill out the blank. I came up with the name The Issue Is because I didn't want it to just be a political show. I wanted it to be a show that talked about issues, but the issue is could be standing up to cancer with Katie Couric. The issue is could be athletes coming together to help the community, or the issue is could be California politics or world politics or other aspects as well. So we've created a show that started as a Friday night show in Los Angeles at 10:30, where we talk to newsmakers. I'm really inspired by Meet the Press with Tim Russert, but I'm also really inspired by Real Time with Bill Maher. And I like late night shows. So it's kind of a combination of sort of a Sunday morning show and a late night show where we are, the goal is to ask politicians tough questions, but also to humanize them, to have some fun, to treat it like it is a Friday night, and to, get a little loose and get people off of their scripts a little bit. So we've done different formats of it. It kind of changes around. We do newsmaker interviews. We sometimes do debates, bringing different sides together. We sometimes do panels, bringing together really smart people. We do shows in the field where we try to highlight and focus on, one or two really interesting people. But there's a lot of variety, which I also think makes the show more interesting. But it is a lot of work. But I am so grateful to have the platform. And we started just in LA and then it expanded. So now we're in every market in California doing the show. But the great part about YouTube and Tubi and other digital outlets is that people can watch it all over the country, like you watching it, even though you're not a California resident. Most of the themes are pretty national and pretty universal. And I think there's a lot of interesting stuff for people that don't even live in California.
And that's incredible. And by the way, I got to talk to you about I know we have time for a couple, but I want to talk to you about the opportunities that you had to go one-on-one with several of the major political figures in your career that range include President Biden, Vice President Harris, and the former California governors Jerry Brown and Arnold Schwarzenegger. So how did you and your team prepare for these interviews?
Well, it's a lot of research. It's watching as many of their previous interviews as you can. You know, when I'm in knowing that I'm going to be doing this, sometimes when I'm cleaning up the house, I've got YouTube going with headphones on, listening to previous interviews. As I'm driving, I've got podcasts on that they've been on. I'm trying to read through some of the stuff that they've done before I go to bed or when I wake up. I oftentimes will ask viewers for questions online. Sometimes I'll ask other reporters that have covered them what they would ask, or ask other people in the newsroom, because I think it's good to get a wide breadth of comments and thoughts. And sometimes, you know, way you're focused on something, there are other things that other people may be focused on. You talk to their team sometimes to find out what they're interested in talking about, because oftentimes they will give you the best answers on the stuff that they're passionate about. That shouldn't determine everything you ask about, but there's some value in doing that too. And then a lot of it is about listening, right? You know, and being willing to, what was that? You know, or go on a different tangent if they say something interesting. You know, the best sort of interview is you have all this stuff lined up, but if something really interesting happens, you know, being able to sort of toss out your note cards and go in. I don't, for me, when I'm doing an interview, don't really look down at notes. I try to maintain eye contact and go into the game sort of ready to go. I don't know if you're a basketball fan. I am, and I'm a huge John Wooden fan, who of course was the great UCLA coach who won so many national championships back in the 60s and 70s. And one of the things he talked about was, you know, all of his preparation for games happened in practice. Like when he would go into a game, he had a rolled up piece of paper and he would sit there and wouldn't say all that much because the work had already been done. And I feel that way a lot about interviews. The preparation is the work, the execution of it, that's the fun part.
Absolutely. So there are a couple of quick interviews I want to talk and debates I want to talk to you about, because those are some of my favorite ones. Recently, you had Governor Newsom on June 15th, 2023. He spoke about homophobia, Disney's relationship with California, and his interview with Sean Hannity. So what was your reaction as you heard Governor Newsom talk about these topics?
Yeah, it was an interesting time to talk to him. It was the night after that Sean Hannity interview aired, and I could tell that he was fired up about the way that went. You know, it was a good moment for him. He got a lot of plaudits from a lot of folks on the right. People that didn't want to like him ended up giving him credit for it. So I think he was in a good mood. That was an example of where his team reached out to us to do an interview. He you know, wanted to weigh in on what was happening in Glendale and some of the different school districts around California. And, you know, Gavin Newsom, whatever you think of him, and obviously people have very interesting reactions, he's a really good interview because he is usually pretty candid. He likes to say things that are provocative. He brings a lot of energy. And he gets bored with the conventions of always, you know, coloring within the lines, which is what most politicians do. And so he will, you know, if you ask him the right question the right way, sometimes give you more than other people do. And frankly, he doesn't do that many interviews with local reporters. So almost every single time I talk with him, there is some news nugget that comes out of it. And you know, we've been doing a lot of interviews. And on the issue is the governor was our first guest on our first show. He wasn't then yet governor then, but he's been our most frequent guest, and makes sense. If we're doing a show that's largely about California politics, to have the most important player in California politics on a lot is good.
Absolutely. Now, another one of your friends is Brian Tyler Cohen, and his recent visit, I believe, was May 26, 2023, and it had over 2 million views on your YouTube channel. And he tackled the Republican presidential nominee. He also talked about the messaging for the Biden White House. So, how does Brian deliver every time?
How does Brian deliver every time? You know, I like Brian. I actually got to know Brian through the show. I had watched his videos and thought that he was an interesting character and wanted to know more about him. I invited him on the show, and in the preceding years, he's turned out to be one of my closest friends, and I have a lot of close friends on the left and the right. Brian is really, really smart and researched and thoughtful. He also has a very deep understanding of the way that YouTube works and the way these social media outlets work. He's basically built up this entire massive audience for himself with almost no staff. It's really incredible, what he's done. And I think he understands how to talk to people like people. The fact that Brian and I don't live in Washington, I think, is a good thing, because you end up interacting with people that maybe aren't, all about politics all the time. And I think he's really effective at breaking down, common sense stuff in a way that the average person can get it. And he's also a really good person.
And I got to stay on Brian because he was part of one of your most viral moments and probably one of the most electric, the issue is, debates we ever had. Way back in October 2020, the finale after the final debate, Brian and Tony Lahren squared off, and it was electric, to say the least. So what was your and how difficult was it to moderate? Because those two were so passionate, it's not even funny.
Well, it's actually easy. That's kind of the easiest thing that I do, because they're such pros, both Brian and Tommy Lahren, that you just kind of let them go. What was nice about that debate, and really has been the focus of our Issue Is Debate series, has been to show that you can disagree without being disagreeable, that you can get into it with somebody. But I always try to find some moments of commonality, whether it be that they both like dogs, which I think is what we did in that debate, or music that they might like, or other things to show that there are some similarities between left and right. But there aren't a lot of spaces right now where you actually hear smart arguments from the left and the right. Too much of cable news is you either get one option or you get the other. You don't necessarily get both. And so part of what we've tried to do with those Issue Is debates is give people two sides and let them go at it. And I think it's really instructive, because, I think a lot of fans of Tommy don't necessarily ever hear Brian in full, and a lot of fans of Brian don't ever hear Tommy in full. Just like Gavin Newsom going on Sean Hannity, there are a lot of people that watch Sean Hannity show that are never used to listening to that in full. And it's part of the reason why I'm so excited about the Gavin Newsom, Ron DeSantis debate possibility on Fox News Channel.
And that's going to be electric. So we got to start winding down our conversation. So if you had a chance to meet with reporters who want to enter the field or are ready to go to the next level, what advice would you like to share with them?
I would say it's good to watch a lot of news. And I think news is a lifestyle. It's not a job. So it's constantly seeing how people do it well, checking out different ways that information is being put out there, and constantly getting inspiration to ultimately try to be yourself. Copying somebody else's style is never all that effective, but being unaware of the pacing and good writing skills and good techniques is all really important. Writing is ultimately really, really important. It's important to not only read a lot and understand that, but study the way to write for broadcast, which is its own style. And part of that is understanding your voice. Internships are hugely helpful and important. Seeing people actually do it in the field is I think as valuable, if not more valuable, than even going to college for it. And there's nothing like practice. It's sort of a weird foreign thing doing this broadcasting thing, and like riding a bike or shooting free throws or anything else, the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Absolutely. And I gotta say, I'm a very proud veteran of the 3 different internships, one at Fox 4 in Kansas City, one at KMGH at ABC, and also KUSA in Denver. So
Wow.
I gotta say, all of those places helped me grow as a journalist and also helped me build to bring on this road and be here.
You've been all over the place.
Absolutely, absolutely. So last question, are you ready?
Last question, am I ready? Is that what you said?
That's what I said.
I'm ready.
Last question,
yes.
Awesome. So where can they find The Issue Is, and where can they connect with you on social media?
Sure. So you can check out The Issue Is on TV in Los Angeles on Friday nights at 10:30 across the state. You can find airtimes at theissueisshow.com. You can also watch our episodes there. You can watch them on Tubi. You can watch them at youtube.com/Elex Michaelson. We also put The Issue Is out as a podcast. If that works for you, search for The Issue Is wherever you stream your podcasts. And connect with me in social media. My name is Elex with an E. So it's Elex Michaelson. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter. There's an underscore in between Elex and Michaelson, which is, old school. I wish Twitter would change that, or X. Maybe X will change that. But you can find me on all the social platforms, and love interacting with people, and grateful for your interest in our show. It means a lot. It's very cool.
Thanks, Alex. So I got to do some plugs. So if you missed an episode of the Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar podcast, Apple Podcasts, Deezer, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Podcast Addict, Spotify, and Spreaker, Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar, JACOBELYACHAR. Now, are you on social media? Because I'm on social media too. Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, and YouTube. All Jacob Elyachar, JACOBELYACHAR. Now, if you want my take on music, what's going on with America's Got Talent, The Masked Singer, visit jakes.shake.com. Visit jakes.shake.com. Alex, it was an honor and privilege to talk with you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to speak with me. I hope this is not our last interview.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the interest. It means a lot. And keep up the good work. You've got a great show, and clearly it's available everywhere.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, have a great one. Goodbye, everybody.